mix-up that you have never seen. My father, he was orange, and my mother, she was green. Oh, my father was an Ulster man, from Protestant was he. My mother was a Catholic girl from County Cork was she. They were married into churches, lived happily enough, until the day that I was born and things got rather tough. Oh, it's the biggest mix-up that you have ever seen. My father, he was orange, and my mother, she was green. Baptized by Father Riley, I was rushed away by car to be made a little orange man, my father's shining star. I was christened David Anthony, but still in spite of that, to my father I was William, while my mother called me Pat. Oh, it is the biggest mix-up that you have never seen. My father, he was orange, and my mother, she was green. With mother every Sunday to mass I proudly stroll, and after that the Orange Lodge would try to save my soul. For both I tried to claim me, but I was smart because I played the flute or played the harp, depending where I was. Oh, it's the biggest mix-up that you have ever seen. My father, he was orange, and my mother, she was green. One day my man's relations came round to visit me.
Hey, good evening. I will now call the March 17th board meeting of the Lane Community College Board of Education to order. In recognition of Governor Kate Brown's Stay Home, Save Lives executive order to combat the spread of COVID-19, this meeting is being held remotely. I'd like to remind board members and staff to keep themselves muted and use the hand raise feature when you would like to speak. Board members are also asked to have their video turned on so you're visible to the viewing public and are visible during the stream. Donna, could you go ahead and take the roll call?
Sure. Holly Johnson.
Here.
Angela Van Kraus.
Present.
Mike Eister.
Here.
Matt Keating.
Here.
Chelsea Jennings.
Here.
Rosie Pryor.
Here.
Lisa Fragola.
Here. Thank you. And we will start our meeting tonight with acknowledgement of homeland, a land recognition. And tonight, a representative from the LCC student government will be reading that. And I believe we have, is Sean here? Okay, great. There you are, Sean Whalen. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Lisa. I'd like to start our meeting with the acknowledgement that the land we are on is traditional homelands of the Kalapuya people. The Kalapuya were stewards of this land for over 14,000 years before their traditional way of life was forever disrupted and destroyed. We start our meeting with humility and reverence for the original inhabitants, the Kalapuya.
Great. Okay, so I am going to turn it over to Dr. Hamilton for our president's report. Dr. Hamilton?
Thank you, Chair Fragola, and welcome everyone to the March board meeting and wishing all of you a very happy St. Patrick's Day. My full report is in your packet, but I would like to highlight a few people and accomplishments this month. First of all, welcome our new Zone 1 board member, Holly Johnson, the first African-American woman to serve on the Lane board. We welcome you and we hope you enjoy your stay with us. Congratulations to Celine Swenson Harris on her reappointment to Zone 7 Budget Committee seat. Later tonight, the board will vote on Zone 1 and Zone 5 appointments. Congratulations to our own Robert Killen, Director of the Lane Small Business Development Center. He was recently named Business Person of the Year by the Springfield Chamber of Commerce. Robert continues to help our small businesses survive and thrive. Congratulations to Brett Roulette for bringing home 5 gold, 2 silver, and 1 bronze award for marketing. As you know, Brett helped revamp the look of our Lane magazine, as well as establish a recognizable marketing brand for LCC throughout this region. Thank you, Brett, and congratulations. Our nursing program has been awarded a 10-year approval from the Oregon State Board of Nursing for our associate's degree program. Congratulations to all the faculty, to the students, and everyone who supports this program. Thank you, Dr. Mindy Du and her Student Affairs team for a successful Retention Palooza Day to reach out to students and help them stay in school. This really was a great event and the students appreciated it. We had some other events this month. So I want to call out the Black Student Union hosted an event to improve how we can better recruit and retain Black male students. It was truly a wonderful event. We hosted a panel celebrating International Women's Day with Labor Commissioner Val Hoyle, Delisa Mishintabi, Mo Young, and Marissa Surratt. And in recognition of our very youngest readers, the Black Student Union hosted Tiny Titans Summit, and they brought in some Black authors to read to our tiniest scholars. It was a wonderful event. So we look forward to lots more events in April. Spring break begins next week, and I'm hopeful that everyone has time to take a breath as we gear up for spring term and the end of our activities. This concludes my report.
Thank you. Okay, so we will move into the part of our meeting where we take statements from the audience. Board Policy 320 states that the chair will remind the public that the board does not respond directly to issues raised by the audience, but will refer those issues to the president for appropriate action. However, we do greatly appreciate attendees' participation in tonight's LCC board meeting and appreciate the willingness of stakeholders to address the board. Please use the raise hand feature, and our staff will call on you in the order you raised your hand. We have a couple of staff people, Deborah and Brett, that are helping with calling on people, and we'll be moving people into the actual webinar meeting so that people may be seen this evening, and hopefully we'll continue that moving forward. For those of you viewing the meeting on a computer, you should be able to see the raise hand feature at the bottom, or you can select participants at the bottom of the screen and click once on the hand icon. For those listening to the meeting on a phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. The meeting host will unmute your speaker, and 3 minutes are allotted to each speaker. And there is a timer that is also visible. So who do we have first?
It looks like our first speaker tonight is Kenny Asheri, followed by Russ Pearson.
Hi, good evening, board. I'm Kenny Asheri, the programmer analyst, and I'm Vice President Labor Relations for the classified staff. I have some charts and media to share tonight. If anyone would be interested to go to a short link that I have, bit.ly/LCC labor. That's bit.ly/LCC labor. And you can follow along with the charts that I will be talking about. Last month, I shared some data trends referencing to some dollars and money and employee counts and trends that were 10-year trends. And those were, so I'm gonna elaborate on that more this evening. And so I've created some charts and some data from the Lane Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, as well as the personnel trends and ratios that highlight these and illustrate these. And so from the financial audit, that's a personnel trends are on page 104 of the PDF, and the snapshots from that data is every October 31st, once a year at our high enrollment and high employment throughout the year in the fall term. And I'm a part of that reporting of those as I support HR and employee reporting. And I want to note and highlight the loss of 105 contracted classified employees, the loss of faculty employees, and the increase in management or exempt employees in this report. Administration typically punctuates the different classifications of management jobs some managers are presidents and vice presidents, and most are not. But at the end of the day, we're talking about positions that are not represented in this exempt category. Moving on to the second chart, the personnel trends and ratios. This is strictly funds 1 and 9. And so that kind of gets into, whereas the first chart was all funds. And so another common perspective from administration is to focus on the operating funds, these funds 1 and 9. And they'll say something like funds 1 and 9 are really the ones you want to examine because those are our operating expenses. Well, you can see here on the second data set and the chart that the increase in exempt employees from the first chart nearly matches the increase in management FTE in funds 1 and 9 only. So we can see here that indeed the managers are increasing in funds 1 and 9, our operating funds, and not only grant funded management jobs. And lastly, the final chart was representing what I shared last week, so the contracted salary and wages from FY10 and FY20, and really looking at the increase in dollars spent for salary and wages, and then the percent of an increase that is. And so,
Penny,
yes.
so that was time. You want to go ahead and wrap it up, please?
Yeah, thank you. None of this data represents the part-time layoffs that happened last year, and that's another huge piece of this puzzle that is missing. But thank you for your time, and I hope that you have a moment to look at that link.
Thank you. Kenny, would you email that bit.ly to me, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, who do we have next in the queue?
We have, sorry about the confusion. We have Buck Potter, but I'm not sure which person Buck Potter is. I think he's logged in as Russ Pearson. So if Russ Pearson could lower his hand, please, then I will look for the other person. Okay, great. So this is Buck Potter, and Buck will be followed by Russ Pearson.
One moment. Good evening to our Board of Education, Chair Lisa Fragula, Vice Chair Rosie Pryor, and members of the board. I'm Buck Potter, Lane Facilities Locksmith, VP of Organizing for LCCF classified members and the LCCF representative on the Budget Development Subcommittee of Lane College of College Council. We would like to recognize our fellow colleagues of the committee, co-chairs Adrian Mitchell and Russ Pearson, Paul Jarrell, Philip Martinez, Lee Eminen, Frankie Kokenor, Jeremiah Vandegrift, Greg Holmes, Zach Evans, and Marty Hannafin. The Budget Development Subcommittee meets weekly throughout the budget season. Each member has spent approximately 15 hours in the formal meetings with a great deal of additional work for many of our members. In total, our work represents the collective thought, wisdom of hundreds of hours. We have been capably aided in this effort by our Director of Budget and Resource Planning, Zach Evans, our Controller, Greg Holmes, and our recently departed Vice President for Finance and Administration, Marty Hannafin, and their hardworking staff.
Buck, are you still there? We can't hear you. You're unmuted, but we still can't hear you.
So you didn't catch any of that?
We heard you up until the end of your appreciations, and that was where we stopped hearing you.
Okay.
So right after the word staff.
That's the end of my portion. So Russ is to take up the next section.
Okay, great. Totally makes sense now.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Is Russ there with you?
No, he's in Florence.
Okay,
All right, so we'll go to Russ Pearson next, and then Russ will be followed by Lee Immonen.
okay. I'm following now. Great. Thank you, Buck.
Good evening. I'm Russ Pearson. I'm the Dean at the LCC Florence Center. I'm co-chair of the Budget Development Subcommittee and the management representative to BDS. And if I could just quickly say hello to our new Zone 1 representative, Holly Johnson. Ms. Johnson, welcome. We're so glad you're here. We are pleased tonight to report that for the first time in recent memory, representatives from among our students, classified staff, faculty, and managers have voted unanimously with no abstentions and no sideways votes to present you with a transformational budget that we believe mitigates the damage of the pandemic and maximizes our judicious, appropriate use of COVID-related funding that's available to the college. Most importantly, we believe this truly is a historic budget, one that fully protects students from any increase to the institutional cost of attendance. And I turn it over to my colleague, Lee Immonen.
I'm sorry, I don't see Lee Immonen in the queue anymore. It looks like he's left the attendees list.
I can see him in the panelists.
All
Can you
right,
hear me?
great.
Speak a little bit louder, Lee.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
So I'm Lee Immonen, Visual Arts faculty and LCCEA representative on the BDS. The BDS has collaboratively constructed the FY22 budget proposal for your consideration with several key goals in mind. First, the budget leverages federal funding to mitigate impacts on students, programs, and services. Second, the budget proposal protects students from increased costs. Students will see $0 increased cost of attendance from this year to next year under this proposal. While you see a tuition increase in the budget, the tuition replaces the current emergency fee, resulting in $0 worth of net increase to students. In addition, the emergency fee, which replaces remote fees and which is built into the proposal, will be fully reimbursed to students through use of the institutional portion of federal funding. Third, it is also tied to the Community College Support Fund so that if state funding increases above the current funding level, the fee will be reduced or eliminated, further protecting students from any impact. Please note, these credits back to students are funded by the institutional share of the federal funds and are in addition to the federal funds earmarked for emergency grants to students. The proposed budget also allocates $1.5 million towards ending fund balance restoration, a crucial step towards more fiscal sustainability for LCC going forward. We do note, however, that the budget is not entirely without sacrifice, as it does include a 2.7% reduction in contracted personnel and a 5% reduction in part-time staffing. In summary, this budget fully protects students, leverages federal funding, prevents excessive program and service cuts, and helps put LCC back on track to financial stability. The Budget Development Subcommittee unanimously supports the FY22 budget proposal and urges your support. Thank you for your time this evening.
Okay, who do we have next in the queue, Deborah? Thank you very much, Lee.
Next in the queue is Shauna Weiland, followed by Adrian Mitchell.
Are you ready for me, Lisa?
We are, go for it.
Wanted to make sure I wasn't stepping on any toes here for the chair position. My name is Shauna Weiland. I'm the vice president for the Student Government Association here at Lane. I wanted to bring to the attention the board, a lack of possibilities for students within our LCC COPS policy that I've recently become aware of. There is no ability for a student currently to trigger any sort of review of their grades if they disagree with a grade given to them by an instructor. The closest thing that we have currently on the books is a procedure that indicates if there is some sort of an error in reporting, then the student can bring that error to the attention of the reporting instructor to correct themselves within the system. What is lacking is the ability for a student to voice a disagreement with the decision made by the instructor, and for the instructor to have any sort of accountability or oversight in regards to the grades that they are issuing to the students. This is a pretty grave oversight in my estimation. I brought this up earlier this afternoon with our provost and some of the associate vice presidents that potentially would be overseeing this policy or this procedure in COPS. I've been made aware of some of the potential barriers that could get in the way of correcting such a potentially simple fix. So in regards to creating a fix that works for everybody involved, I would like to encourage any and all faculty and union to be open-minded to the possibility of renegotiating contracts that might get in the way of creating the ability for a student to say, hey, I disagree with this decision that ultimately impacts my entire process of earning a degree, my grade for a class, and my financial investment within this college institution, just for the sake of having some sort of control over their own agency in their classes and their education. That's the extent of my reporting on this grades changing policy. On an entirely unrelated note, I did want to acknowledge that from the College Council, I am one of the voting members of that council, and I was one of the dissenting members that suggested putting forward the Budget Development Subcommittee report to the Board of Education today. It's not in any recognition of their failing efforts or the good work that they've done. It was simply a no vote cast on my behalf to indicate that College Council had a very small window of time to actually consider the BDS subcommittee's reporting and what their, I'm sure, a very good decision they're putting in front of you today. College Council, we just didn't have very much time to actually review it, and I didn't feel comfortable casting a well-informed vote, so I voted no. That's why you don't have a unanimous consent from College Council like you do from the Budget Development Subcommittee, and I just wanted to voice concern and awareness of that lack of consent on my part. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Sean. Adrian, you're up next.
Good evening, members of the Board of Education. Thank you for your service to the community and the opportunity to address you during public comment. I'm Adrienne Mitchell, President of LCCEA, representing the 200 full-time and 375 part-time faculty of LCC. I will read the first half of a joint statement from LCCEF and LCCEA, and Frankie Kokenauer will read the second half. We make this joint statement in solidarity. As members of the Budget Development Subcommittee, we respectfully recommend to you the unanimous BDS budget for this year. We believe that the BDS budget achieves a number of goals, including fully leveraging federal funding to protect programs and services and maintain continuity for students. In addition, the BDS budget fully protects students from any increase in the cost of attendance from this year to next. That means there will be $0 increase in the cost to students because federal funds will offset the proposed emergency fee, and the tuition change replaces the current emergency and remote fees. Furthermore, the proposed emergency fee is tied to the CCSF. So that means that if state funding for community colleges increases, the fee will be reduced or eliminated. This is the first time that we are aware of in LCC history that there will be no increased costs to students. Next, Frankie is going to share the rest of the statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Go ahead, Frankie.
So good evening, board members. I'm Frankie Kokenauer, president of LCCEF, representing the full-time and part-time classified employees of LCC. I will read the second half of the joint LCCEF-LCCEA statement as follows. In addition to our support of the BDS budget, we respectfully request that the Board of Education take an active role to vote on any proposed retrenchments, i.e. layoffs, This is consistent with past practice and board policy. The Board of Ed has voted through the budget approval process on all previous retrenchments affecting faculty and classified employees in the past. This includes layoffs resulting from reorganizations like the one that the administration has proposed this year, which will impact one full-time faculty member. For example, please see FY18 budget files approved by the board by vote. These files demonstrate the level of detail presented to the board for a vote, including program and service reductions and eliminations, as well as restructures and reorganizations that affected classified employees, faculty, and managers. You will also see that the files in the board voted on clearly denote the number of employees impacted by each substantive change, such as cuts or reorganizations. Thank you again for your considerations of the budget development subcommittee. I can't say that today. Budget for your active engagement and oversight of the overall budget, including your vote and voting on any changes that impact contracted employees. See FY18 budget changes adopted by the Board of Ed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Deborah, do we have anyone else wishing to make a public statement?
There are no further attendees who have indicated that they'd like to speak.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who took the time to speak to the board tonight. We are going to move on to the consent agenda. There is a lot listed in the consent agenda this evening. Are there any board members who would like to pull something from the consent agenda before we proceed with the approval? Matt Keating?
Thanks, Chair Fragola. I'd like to pull items L and M off the consent agenda, as I have a couple questions about how the RFPs used our community benefits agreement lens. And if we could place those in discussion item D and E, please.
Okay, so I have that we will pull items L, bond project, new building design team, and item M, bond project parking lot rehabilitation, and move them into our discussion items. Is there anything else anyone would like to pull from the consent agenda? Give you a
I move
moment.
approval of the consent agenda with the changes that Matt just proposed.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Donna, would you call the roll for that vote on the consent agenda approval, please?
Holly Johnson,
Yes.
Angela Van Kraus,
Aye.
Mike Eister,
Yes.
Matt Keating,
Aye.
Chelsea Jennings,
Aye.
Rosie Pryor,
Aye.
Lisa Fragola.
Yes. Okay, so we have approved the rest of the consent agenda, and thank you, Michael Blade, for all of your good work on those policies. It's good to see them move forward. So we're going to move forward on to our action items. The first action item we have is the appointment of 2 budget committee members, one in zone 1 and one in zone 5. The recommendation is to appoint Ian Winbrock for zone 1 budget committee representation and Shafan Cancel for appointment to zone 5 budget committee. And I'll provide a moment for either Chelsea Jennings or Holly Johnson if you'd like to say anything about your recommendations or those individuals.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Holly. I just am looking forward to working with Ian, and I approve and recommend him to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Chelsea?
Thank you. I also am excited, was excited to see Siobhan's application. I'm excited to have her application in front of my colleagues this evening, and looking forward to tonight's vote. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you both. So do I have a motion from a board member, Angela?
I have a question. I'm not prepared to make a motion, but to have
Okay.
some discussion.
So do I have a motion? All right.
I'd like to move that we approve those two members of the budget committee.
Second. Second. Okay. Mike, did you want to speak to your motion?
Well, I've had contact with both of them and I'm impressed by them, and I trust our board members who made their recommendation.
Okay, thank you. And I see Matt has his hand raised, followed by Angela.
Thanks, Chair. And I just want to make an observation and maybe a request attached to the observation. The observation is that we have historically not operated by any kind of cemented precedent there, in that sometimes budget committee members come and address us in public comment. Sometimes they don't. But we have a long history of affirming the decision made by the board member appointing in their either in their respective zone or countywide, whatever, however they best see fit. I would have loved to have at least had some sort of interaction in the digital space with these appointees, one of whom was recently interviewed by the board. And so we got a chance to have some FaceTime with them, but I'm just expressing not dissatisfaction, but I'm expressing a longing in the future when there's an appointment that there's at least a touchstone with the prospective budget committee member in this board, because we don't know if they either don't know that they're appointed, they don't care that they're appointed, or they may decline to serve. I'm glad to hear the affirmation and support from both Chelsea and our newest member, Holly. And so I don't want to get in the way of the appointments. I just hope in the future that we have either woven into an operating agreement, some sort of touchstone to be able to meet our budget committee members, please.
Duly noted, Matt. Thank you. And I am working on summarizing a board operating procedure for that process, and we'll take that into consideration. Thank you. Angela, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you. I have the same question as our last budget committee member vote, and that is really not about the individuals. I'm confident that you selected excellent individuals. I'm curious about the process. I'm wondering, Holly and Chelsea, if you could tell us a little bit about your selection process for these candidates.
I can start, and thank you. So while we were offered a list of candidates, we just made the best selection. I speak for myself. So given a list of candidates and able to read their credentials and their experience, led me to pick Ian, because I just thought he was the best person to serve in this capacity. So I was able to select from quite a few applicants, and he rose to the top, and he's the person that I selected or recommended, actually. And I trust that the board will trust my judgment, but yes, that's why I selected. Actually, I was in agreement with both Ian and Siobhan. So it was interesting how we selected separately, but came to a conclusion together on this. So they were both my top picks.
Thank you, Holly. Chelsea?
Thank you. Yes, I very similar to the process in which Holly just articulated. I looked at the applications through a couple of different lenses. One, of course, is that person's particular interest in serving on the budget committee and their why. Also taking a look at the life experiences that they bring and their professional experiences that they bring. And additionally, I looked at the applications through a lens of equity, diversity, and inclusion, What voices do we not currently have on our budget committee? What voices do we need? So those were a couple of the different lenses that I looked through when looking through the applications. I also took highly into consideration any personal recommendations that I received. And in particular, I did hear some really amazing personal recommendations about Siobhan, and that's a couple of the reasons why I wanted to put her forward tonight for a vote.
Thank you both. So seeing no other hands, I will ask Donna to call the roll. So the motion on the floor is to recommend Siobhan cancel for the budget committee in zone 5 and Ian Winbrick for the budget committee position in zone 1. Donna?
Holly Johnson,
Yes.
Angela Van Kraus,
Aye.
Mike Eister,
Yes.
Matt Keating,
Aye.
Chelsea Jennings,
Aye.
Rosie Pryor,
Yes.
Lisa Fragala.
Yes. Great, thank you. So we have approved these 2 individuals to the budget committee. Thank you very much. Let's go ahead and move on to the budget update. And I believe we have both Zach Evans, Director of Budget and Resource Planning, and Provost Paul Jarrell here to present on this evening. And then we do have a recommended action in the board packet.
Thank you, Chair Fragala. I'm going to ask Brett to share the update on his screen, please. Thank you. So we have quite a dense packet to work through, and I saw a limited amount of time. So I'm going to get into the details on the projection as well as the scenarios and provide some high-level highlights of some of these other pages. So the calendar at this time should be familiar. This might be the 3rd or 4th time that we've shared this at a board meeting. The biggest change between February and March is that the budget forum will be on April 7th. Moving on to the next page, we have our standard format for our projection, where the green column in this case is last fiscal year total actuals for funds 1 and 9, or operating, what we call our operating funds. The middle column is this year, and the big change on the blue column in the middle is that we've started to apply some of the federal emergency relief funds from the round 2 stimulus package into the projection. And by adding that, we're starting to show a small surplus in combined funds 1 and 9 for the current fiscal year. Unfortunately, we are still operating with limited guidance regarding the usage of these emergency relief funds and the different provisions that are outlined in them. So we're still waiting for more guidance from the Department of Ed on how we can, as the grant award says, defray the cost of coronavirus and make sure that we're doing that reasonably and under what's allowable at the grant terms. So the orange column is the planning projection of what we're going to build budget proposals, what we built the scenarios later in the packet upon. So this assumes a 2% decline in credits compared to this year for next year. It assumes flat property tax revenue collection, about approximately 8.3% of the community college support fund. In this column, no tuition rate change. The international program, as we mentioned before, moved into Fund 9. So the additional revenue there on tuition is attributed to that transition. Utilizing 300,000 of capital reserves from Fund 4 to help us offset our major maintenance expenditures. The current position list that we had as of last week with 3.5% swirl, which is how we account for attrition or salary savings from attrition. Utilizing $860,000 of the PERS reserve to offset increasing OPE costs or fringe benefit costs. The PERS balance then, assuming usage of $860,000, is at the bottom of the page, which means that the current utilization of the PERS reserve after next year, we'd have about 1.5 years left to use those dollars. We are assuming greater material and services expenses next year because of the transition back to in-person learning and back on campus. And then the transfers out, the highlight there is $700,000 for major maintenance. With that comes to a little over about rounding about a projected $6.1 million deficit. I should mention before I glossed over it, so the OPE rates next year are projected to increase full-time to 67% and part-time to 40%. And that's a 2% increase on the full-time rate and a 3% increase on the part-time rate. Moving into the next pages 3 through 5, this is just an overview of our revenue categories, expense categories, what we, the components that make those up, the data sources we use, and the assumptions we make. So that's there for reference. And then going down to page 6, this is then what we're projecting right now to finish the general fund as of May 17th, looking at least, hopefully, a $924,000 surplus in the general fund. We still have some more work to do to bring that up to our fund balance restoration target for the year, and we are still working on that. The next page for reference is a list of balancing levers. So revenue are things that we can shift up and down as we move forward, and there's assumptions built with each one of those pieces. As the same thing with expenses, and then as we're always considering personnel cost adjustments, our fund balances, the level of our reserves, deferred maintenance needs, and ongoing PERS cost escalation. Moving into page 8, here are some investments from our strategic planning and program review and departmental planning process that are going into, at least they're included in the projection that was shared a few pages earlier. And now we're moving towards the scenarios. And I'm going to pause here to see if there are any questions as I move through those items.
Does anybody have any questions on that first piece that was shared? Zach, maybe you could just say what OPE means, and I just was trying to track any acronyms, and maybe we could work on saying the names for acronyms, but what's OPE?
So when I referenced the CCSF, that was the Community College Support Fund, so it's how we're funded by the state. OPE is other personnel expenditures, which is how we tabulate our fringe benefits. So what makes up OPE is the PERS costs, insurance costs, payroll taxes. I'm sure I'm missing a few other major components, but that's
that's great. Thank you. Mm-hmm. I see Mike has his hand raised. Go ahead, Mike.
I was just wondering what we heard about with regard to the BDS recommendations. Is that factored into these projections, or is that such new information that it's not built in yet?
So that's the next slide.
the
I'm going
next
to, or the
part.
next piece I'm going to move to. Yep.
Thanks.
Can,
And just point of information, Budget Development Subcommittee, recognizing that we have a newer board member who hasn't really done a full onboarding acronym training yet.
yes, which acronym training could in higher ed take a long time. So thank you. Go ahead, Zach.
Thanks. I'll have Brett bring back his screen back up. Thank you. So I'd like to thanks to Buck, Russ, and Lee for their public comment tonight, and also many thanks to Adrian Mitchell and Russ Pearson for their hard work and dedication to leading us through this process, as well as the other subcommittee members. And to repeat from the public comment, Frankie Kokenauer, Buck Potter again, Lee Immonen, Jeremiah Vandegraff, Greg Holmes, Phil Martinez, Paul Jarrell, and then a de facto member, Mira Mason Reader.
Zach, is there any way to make that bigger?
Brett, I think if you download it as a PDF, if you stop sharing, or that works too, I think.
That's a little bit better.
If you download it as a PDF and just show the PDF, it's sometimes more clear.
Okay, I'm working on it.
Thank you. I mean, I can see it on my other computer, but it's also helpful for everybody here. Can you make it bigger so that we just see one scenario at a time? And then, yeah, there we go. Great, thank you.
Okay. Out of these three, what we would classify as scenario B, which we don't need to scroll over, is the unanimous consensus budget development subcommittee and administration proposal. It's important to note that 2 out of the 3 students involved in the process voted to approve the budget development subcommittee consensus proposal, 1 in BDS and 1 on College Council. So the 3 scenarios presented include difficult decisions, and due to the pandemic, most of the variables are still kind of unknown and up in the air at this time. It's important to note that staffing is lean and employees are tasked with doing more with less. Given these circumstances, the recommended balancing proposal includes a tuition adjustment, personnel savings due to attrition, leveraging the use of federal relief funds, and primarily through voluntary separations, while also controlling M&S expenditures. The primary toggles between these 3 scenarios is tuition. Scenario A has a $2.50 per credit tuition increase, which aligns with the Higher Education Price Index, or what we refer to as HEPI, as an inflationary adjustment. Scenario B, which is the unanimous consensus proposal, toggles a $5 per credit tuition increase. And scenario C, a $7.50 per credit tuition increase. Brett, I think you can just hold right there for a second. Thanks. So that would be the revenue toggle. In scenario A, the $1.31 million reduction before OPE or other personnel expenditures is estimated about 15 to 20 contracted positions. Scenario B, estimated savings a little bit over $1 million, is about 12 to 17 positions. And scenario C is about 11 to 16 positions in regards to the contracted personnel balancing option. For historical context, moving through FY19 through 21 this current year on personnel, FY19 was about a $3.5 million contracted personnel savings. FY20 was about a $3 million personnel program and service reductions with part-time and contracted. FY21 this year was about 1.5 million for contracted, $500,000 for part-time, and going into next year, about 1.7 million in contracted and 745 in part-time, with the full intent of leveraging stimulus funding to the fullest extent possible to cover those expenses. So I'm providing the context to show that over, at least with my time with the college, there's been substantial reductions in personnel that have been built into different proposals. And the history here is important because, as I mentioned in the introduction, staffing levels are becoming lean, and any further reductions in personnel would lead us to involuntary separations. Also in those 3 years, at least from 20 to 21, we've had substantial materials and services and capital reductions. These are starting to appear because we have not really had an inflationary adjustment on materials and services budgets in the last couple of years. We're essentially rolling over budgets year over year, making some adjustments based on investments that I alluded to earlier, also then some change in service levels. But those budgets aren't keeping up with inflation or really with the demands that the programs have in order to continue the level of instruction that we're providing. So with this, the recommendation is scenario B at a $5 per credit tuition increase, leveraging federal stimulus money as much as possible within the parameters of the second stimulus package to offset revenue losses or tuition augmentation, using a $10 emergency fee extension, reducing the remote fee charges that we were doing. So since last fall, we were charging a remote fee on classes that would have traditionally been offered in person, but were moved remote due to the public health crisis. So we're talking about stopping that practice, converting the emergency fee to $10, pegging that to the Community College Support Fund, and using federal stimulus money to offset that cost to students. There's also built into here year 2 of the general fund balance restoration effort, and using to the fullest extent possible additional federal stimulus dollars to partially offset M&S expenditures. And what I mean by that is, as we begin to return to campus, there will be social distancing requirements, and I'm anticipating purchasing more plexiglass and making areas safe. So there's going to be costs associated with that, and we can cover those costs with the emergency relief funding that we've received from the federal government. I'll pause again for questions.
Okay, are there any specific questions about the budget scenarios? Angela?
Thank you, and thank you for the comprehensive handout, Zach. It's much appreciated. I'm looking at the top couple of expenditures lines and sort of noticing the different percentage reductions that are associated with each scenario. I feel like I may have asked this question previously on a similar exhibit. What's the probability that we'll actually meet those reduction percentages in any given scenario? I feel like that's a challenge every year to actually meet those levels that we budget for. So I guess what's the probability that we'll meet it? How do we know we'll meet it? That sort of thing.
So yes, one of the issues is, as I was trying to illustrate with the historical context of adding more and more to that personnel line, at some point it's untenable. And here we've outlined a plan to use the federal stimulus money to the fullest extent possible. And what I mean by that is the outline in the second round of stimulus said to defray the cost of coronavirus. And it said that you could include payroll that's associated with that. So Greg Holmes and I go back and forth on this consistently because, again, there's loose guidance from the Department of Ed on how to apply this. But so far, we've identified at least 2 individuals for next year that we can charge 85% for one and 90% for the other to the grants. We've also been talking about identifying a principal investigator for this grant and charging a portion of their time. So between that and then continuing to use the small piece of money that's set aside in bond administration, where we are charging our 2 of our managers in facilities portions of their time for the bond work that they're doing, it's about 25% of that figure. So we've already done that. And then we've also launched a separation incentive for faculty. So we don't have a target set on the net of full-time faculty positions that would be held open next year. But I'm anticipating that that will generate additional savings to help us get to the target that's in B. As you move farther away from that, it does become harder with voluntary separations only.
Okay, and so I have myself in the queue. So Zach, I heard you say that our materials and services budget has not kept up with inflation. And so, and you mentioned we've just been rolling that over. Is that true of these scenarios also?
So this was a little harder to peg given the situation we're operating in. I'm looking at moving forward. So the budget that we built this year is much higher than the actuals coming in because we're not spending as much material and services. Utilities are down, as in most employees are working remote. So and then we're not buying as much, paper and supplies and printing because we're not on campus. So when I did the projection, I forecasted an increase in expenses for next year compared to this year because I kind of shot the gap between what we spent in FY20 and then what I'm thinking we're going to be spending as we're moving back to campus. So the savings here would be tightening up in specific areas. I anticipate that travel will still be restricted for a good portion of next year. So there will be savings there. Also, I would like all COVID-related cleaning supplies and any materials we need to address that to be put on the grants, as well as any technology that we're buying to further enhance classrooms to go onto the grants. So some of these would be routine expenses that we'd have every year, leverage the grants to pick up some of it. And then we're going to have to be very mindful of the rest of what we're spending to make sure that we're not creeping back towards unsustainable spending levels.
Okay, thank you. So I have Rosie followed by Mike.
Thank you. Zach, all this information is really helpful. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And I have a couple of questions. The $10 emergency fee extension, that's a one-time per student per term fee. Is that how that works?
It is a $10 per credit fee.
Oh, so it is per credit.
That we are going to cover. The plan is to cover it entirely with federal stimulus money. So the students will not see that, will not pay that.
Okay, so just to be sure I understand it, that fee is multiplied by the number of credits per term I'm enrolled in. $10 times 12 credits per term. Okay, so I'm a student. I'm enrolled today. I'm going to enroll in the fall. Walk me through what's my bill going to look like? Am I paying more or am I not? What's the bill I'm going to receive, and how is that money going to kick in?
So from the institutional side, it would be a 0% change. However, there could be a small change to course specific fees. So materials that you'd buy for a lab might change. So if you took a lab last year, you take a lab next year's lab could be more expensive if that's the course specific fee has changed.
So to be sure I understand further, a year from now, I want to enroll again. Am I suddenly facing a $15 per credit increase in the cost of enrolling? A year from now. In other words, what I want to understand is this just buying 12 months worth of time before we are proposing to implement a $5 per credit tuition increase and a $10 per credit emergency fee increase?
Can I try to answer that, Rosie? Yeah, so thank you. The tuition increase is $5 per credit tuition increase. That puts the cost next year per credit the same as this year because students are paying the emergency fee this year currently. It's a $5 per credit emergency fee that students are paying the cost of. So their cost per credit will stay the same. We're just moving that temporary emergency fee is what we're going to recommend as a tuition increase. So their cost of attendance stays the same. The $10 per credit emergency fee is a one-year fee that will sunset. It will be prorated based upon the CCF funding. So when the year is up, that's over. That particular fee is over. The students they'll see it on their account as a charge, but then they'll see a credit right next to it. So if they take 12 credits, they'll see a $120 charge there for that emergency fee, but then they'll see a $120 credit. Their tuition will increase by the $5 over last year or over this current year, but it stays the same because they are paying that emergency fee this year, not the stimulus funds.
And so take me forward a year when there's no money now there's no emergency fee.
So your decision for tuition then would be based upon changes from what would be the $126 per credit fee that we have. The $10 per credit fee is gone, right? So you just have the tuition fee that you would make a decision based upon for 2023, right? So it's going to be that for that, right? So it's not like there's a plan to roll the tuition back, but at that point in time, the tuition could stay where it is, or it could be raised by HEPI, or it could be reduced if conditions are such for that, but it would be just the tuition at that point.
So for all intents and purposes, we're increasing tuition. We're just delaying implementation for a year.
So Mike, you're next in the queue.
Yeah, I have two questions. Paul, I think you answered one, but I want to make sure I understand. This is not going to be a case where students have to pay up front and then wait for a reimbursement.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it would just be there would be a charge and a credit on the same statement.
Great. Okay. My second question is, I think for the entire time I've been on the board, and I suspect for before that, there has been a separation incentive. I don't know how we wean ourselves off of this. Why would anybody ever think of retiring without getting an incentive if we offer an incentive every year? I understand why an institution would, on an occasional basis, very rarely offer a separation incentive. But when you regularize it, that means you're paying people to leave. And somehow that just doesn't make sense to me.
Angela.
Thank you. I think I have two questions. It might be one question and a comment. Regarding the, oh gosh, I have too many windows and too many PDFs open right now. The $10 emergency fee federal stimulus offset, I know we've just had a lot of discussion about this. I've heard, it sounds like what I'm hearing is that we hope, we intend. Are we certain that there will be a federal stimulus, that we'll be allowed to use federal stimulus money to offset that for a year? Is that?
Paul, I see you
or is
shaking
that
your head.
something that's
Jess,
not
did you
clear?
want to answer that?
Well, yeah, no, to my knowledge, that is correct. That is a done deal. That's money that we will be able to use and is appropriate to use in this capacity.
Okay, and then I guess my comment is that, you know, last year when we were talking about a $5 emergency fee, it was very clear that this was a one-year fee. It would be sunset, it would end. And now we're talking about a tuition increase as though it's not an increase because tuition will be flat if we consider the fee, which was not meant to continue. And so I guess I'm not supportive of the $5 per credit tuition increase. And I'm really concerned about the $10 fee because I'm worried that next year we're going to come back and we're going to say, well, there'll be no change to student tuition if we just raise it $10 per credit. And I understand that the intention is that that would be offset. I'm really concerned about it. That's my comment. Thank you.
Yeah, and if I could give a brief comment on that, I appreciate what you're saying. I mean, we're not trying to do a bait and switch here. You are correct. The $5 fee was supposed to go away. The tuition increase, if you view this as a tuition increase, let's pretend that $5 fee wasn't even there. This is a 4% increase in tuition this year. We have averaged over the past 5 years 4% per year in increasing in tuition. So it's not out of the norm for what we have done in the past and what we have brought for you. It is in line with tuition increases that we see around the state. UO, I think, was just a little over 4%. So I mean, I think that it's a reasonable increase. Nobody wants to increase tuition. It should be $0, but it does allow us, I think, to be able to maintain good quality programming and student services without having too big of an impact in reduction in force.
Okay, I see Dr. Hamilton has her hand up, and then I have myself in the queue. And go ahead, Marge.
Thank you. So I want to help Angela and other folks understand the thinking, because everybody's correct. But if you look back a year ago, we never suspected COVID would continue. I mean, honestly, we were down 4 to 6%, and we thought that was horrible. Remember that? We dove 14 to 16%. I mean, it is beyond what any of us could have even imagined. That's the first point. We are finally seeing a turnaround, and I think that last count we were like at 11. Like, we'll be in single digits down, I think, after this now. But the emergency fee, I specifically asked at every meeting with the HEC about that emergency fee. Is it eligible? And the answer was yes. And then I specifically asked if we were to raise tuition, is that eligible? The answer is no. So that's why we had to find a delicate balance between the emergency fee and tuition. Because if, a couple of people had great suggestion, like, well, if that's the case, if it's eligible, why don't you put it all on the emergency fee? Because then we don't want to come back a year later and be offset from operations. It still just takes so much in operations for this college and the exec tried to explain to us that, we still have supplies, we still have contracts with Lucian and all of our partners. They keep rising every year, with M&S. So we've got to make sure that our operations is proportionally going up with inflation. So that's why the budget committee, really did a nice job, because they were trying to leverage every dime we're going to get. And then the third thing I want to throw out there, again, uncertainty, but we've received information that then the next round of money is coming. So if the next money indeed is coming, as much as 15, 16 million, right? Then 7.5 million, we could do this whole thing all over again. So what do you do if you don't have losses? You give the money back to the students. And that's what we're banking on, that we could actually give money back to the students. But we can't say that tonight. But we're pretty sure the money's coming. We're pretty sure, because we've got our names on lists. It says 15 million, half of it, 51% has to go to students. So they're going to get something. So that's all that backstory that Zach painfully said is uncertain, but it's optimistic.
Thank you, Marge. So we are at time for this. I am going to suggest we continue moving forward, also knowing that we've added a few things to our discussion section. We have a recommendation from the budget subcommittee and a recommendation from the administration on this. And I'm wondering if I have a motion. Matt.
Move approval for an emergency fee of $10 per credit hour for academic year 2021-2022, recognizing the emergency fee shall be reduced proportionally if the state of Oregon's Community College Support Fund, CCCSF, exceeds $640.9 million for the biennium.
Second.
Okay. Was that a second, Rosie?
Yes.
Okay. So just to clarify, Matt, are you recommending the whole thing that is in the packet?
That's not what I seconded.
Okay, that's why I'm clarifying. Or are you just recommending the $10 emergency fee?
I'll repeat the motion. I'm moving approval for an emergency fee of $10 per credit hour for academic year 2021-22, recognizing the emergency fee shall be reduced proportionally if the state of Oregon's Community College Support Fund exceeds $640.9 million for the biennium.
Okay, but you're not including the recommendation of the $5 tuition increase.
I will take the amendment, but I've already made a motion. It's been seconded.
Okay, I'm just clarifying. Okay,
I'm happy to have that conversation, and I would be supportive of that. But I think for process purposes, I think it would need to be added as an amendment.
I just was clarifying. Thank you. And we have a second from Rosie Pryor. Did you want to speak to your motion, Matt?
Yeah, thank you. This is the first time that I can recall this board, should we pass this, intentionally tying a fee increase and then retroactively, hopefully, a proportional decrease based on what the state of Oregon gives us. It puts it squarely on our partners in Salem, and I would advocate for and ask for a united front to lobby appropriately for increased investments in the Community College Support Fund. Moreover, Chair Fragola, I would welcome the amendment as you alluded to. My bad for not including that in the original motion. So if anyone would like to entertain that amendment, that would be welcome.
So we have a motion on the floor to pass the $10 emergency fee, and it was seconded by Rosie, and I have Rosie who has her hand raised first, and then Mike Eister.
Thank you. I support this proposed part 2 of the requested action, and I would like to vote on these 2 parts separately, personally.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Mike?
I'm happy to vote on them separately or as an amendment. To me, I actually think Rosie's idea of doing it separately is probably a good idea.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mike. Chelsea?
Thank you. So two things. One, so just because I feel a little confused. So there's two parts to what has been brought to us as a unanimous proposal. So we're dividing up those two pieces and voting on them separately.
So the recommendation, if you look in the board packet, we have started to add the recommended actions, and the recommended action that what did include the $5, the recommended action from the budget subcommittee and from the administration was both the $10 emergency fee and the $5 increase, correct? And so now we have a motion just on the $10 fee. And
Great.
if we end up with a second motion, we will move forward with that one, but we just have the one motion right now.
Great, thank you.
that-
Yes, thank you for that clarification. Second thing is I think it's important just to note that I am a current part-time accredited student here at LCC. I started taking classes in the summer of 2020. At the time of me beginning to take classes, I sought the advice of our legal counsel and of our college president about my ability to vote on any tuition increases and emergency fees. And I was, the recommendation from our legal counsel and from our college president is that there is no conflict of interest here. I am legally allowed to move forward and vote on these items this evening. And I just wanted, for the sake of transparency, to bring that up this evening before we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you for declaring that potential conflict of interest, Chelsea. I have Angela.
Thank you. And so this action, the actual motion doesn't reference the offsetting money from the federal dollars for COVID relief. I assume that's not necessary in our motion, that that's simply how it will be administered by the college, but I'd like to confirm that.
Could someone confirm that for Marge? Do you want to address that question, or Zach or Paul? So what I'm hearing is that the motion says approval of an emergency fee of $10 per credit hour for the academic year. It talks about the CCFF, and it does say the emergency will be reduced proportionally to match increases to the CCSF, the Community College Support Fund, but it doesn't call out the waiver, the reduction of that $10 emergency fee with the federal dollars. So does anybody ever?
That is the intent, is to leverage the second stimulus funding round, the lost revenue provision in it, to cover the cost of the emergency fee.
Angela, is that good enough? Is that good enough for you, or did you want to suggest an amendment to the motion, which both the maker and the second would have to agree to?
I would like to suggest an amendment. I'm not comfortable with approving this $10 fee without being really clear that it's not going to be coming out of students' pockets. I don't know exactly what language would be necessary.
So
if we can make that, let me see.
I would say that it is the intent of the college and of the president, and so I have confidence that that will occur if I'm hearing them publicly state that, but we can move forward on this motion now. If you want time to think about it, there's also time for another motion. Angela?
So I would like to offer a friendly amendment that this emergency fee will be implemented and offset by federal COVID relief dollars.
Okay, so the maker of the motion needs, if it's a friendly amendment, the maker of the motion and the second both need to be open to the amendment. Matt?
My trepidation is that it's outside of our lane and as the Board of Education, and I completely hear our administration loud and clear about the levers that they're going to pull. They've already, it's not their first rodeo. They went through this with CARES dollars. So I have trust and confidence and faith in our team, and I don't see a need to cement federal language in an motion that is squarely directed toward state funding.
Okay, so Rosie, I have you next in the queue.
I share Angela's concern, and I would be supporting this motion with the understanding that those federal funds are being used to offset the implementation of this fee. And I think if one of the board has enough concern that we be explicit about that, I'm happy to support that in a subsequent motion if Angela wants to make a different motion once this one has been dealt with.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
Yeah, I've thought about this a little bit more, and I actually think this motion should be defeated and that a motion should be made to accept the package that was recommended to us. That package was put together very thoughtfully. A lot of work went into it, and I don't think the motion should be separated. So I plan to vote against this motion and make a motion to adopt the package as recommended.
Okay, so Holly? Did
I was going
you?
to second the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table, and we'll work through that one first. So I just would like to clarify that the recommended motion in the packet does not include the language that Angela is suggesting. So, so to clarify, Mike, you're saying moving forward with the suggestion that is in the packet. I would also like to state that I also am not clear on the role of the board in terms of directing the president around the CARES dollars. And I would appreciate any clarification on that someone could provide. Marge?
In as much as I'd like to say everything is perfect, it is not. And that is the reality you're dealing with tonight. Zach and Greg Holmes are literally on the phone every day. We've been given every single reason to believe, including me personally hearing from HEC, that the emergency fee can be reimbursed because it's a valid loss. But it's like filing your taxes. Until you file and it comes back, are you 100%? But, you know, again, the best information we have is this is secure, and we cannot change that information. And I apologize, I can't be more sure than that. But every single indication we have is that this will be, this is reimbursable, or as Greg Holmes says, we can book it as an expense because of losses.
Okay, thank you. Matt?
No, thank you. I'm sorry, my hand has been up this whole time.
Okay, great. Just noticed that. Okay, so I'm Not seeing any other hands raised at the moment. So we have a motion on.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I do have, I apologize
Okay.
to interrupt. It just came to me. Mike's suggestion is sound. However, it may just be easier since there's a motion on the table to accept an amendment that adopts both scenarios as he articulated. And that would be a welcome amendment, since there's already something on the table and we're already in the process of moving forward, rather than do a piecemeal and adopt half and go back, or reject half and go back and then adopt what we just rejected. I think it's much more prudent if and I would, as the maker of the motion, I would welcome an amendment that even inserts language of the $5 proposal as well. So Madam Chair, I defer to Mike if you'd like to make that motion.
Okay, I see, Mike, you have your hand raised. You need to unmute, Mike. There you go.
I would like to make that motion. I understand that it can't be a friendly amendment because the seconder of the motion is very likely not to support it as a friendly amendment. So I'd like to amend the original motion so that it includes the $5 tuition that was recommended in the package.
Okay. Paul, I'm seeing your hand.
Yeah, if I could just clarify, there's it's a tuition package. The cornerstone of it is the $5 per credit increase, but there are also changes to international tuition rates and other rates as well. So the amendment, if what you're proposing, Mike, is to accept our proposal for to move our proposal for that, then it would be the tuition package that we've outlined there, just to be clear.
That is in fact what the recommended motion says, and that's what I'm proposing.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay. All right, so we have a request for a friendly amendment to amend so that the motion is the full recommendation as stated in the packet. And
it's not a friendly amendment, Lisa.
It's not a friendly amendment. Okay, so you can't make another motion while there's another motion on the table. So if I'm just going to back us up to the motion that is on the table, which is the approval of the emergency fee of $10 per credit hour for the academic year 2021-22. If the CCSF is funded at greater than $640.9 million for the biennium, then the emergency fee will be reduced proportionally to match increases to the CCSF for the 2021-23. So, Matt, I believe we do not have a friendly amendment.
Madam Chair, I believe Mike is making an amendment. If it gets a second, I believe we would go to a vote on the amendment before we would then go back to the original motion. So since his amendment includes language to be added, I suspect we would need to either start discussion on the amendment if there is an efficient second. I would be happy to do so. However, I don't know if I can since I'm the maker of the original motion.
So is there a second to Mike's amendment to the original motion?
Second.
There is a second. Okay. So now we need to debate the amendment to the original motion, and we will vote on the amendment, and then we will have to vote on the whole thing. I think I'm getting it. I'm sorry for stumbling here, y'all. So is there any comments or questions, or is there any comments on the current amendment? Mike?
As the maker of that
Yes.
amended motion, I would like to once again state, and Paul really reinforced this, in saying that this was presented as a package, an integrated package that had a lot of thought, a lot of consideration, and a lot of agreement among decision makers and leaders at the college. So I have confidence that that is a good motion. I understand that some people may disagree with tuition increase. I think this motion is necessary, and the fact that it was unanimously agreed to by the college is even a greater plus. That's all I'll say about that.
Okay, Angela?
Thank you. There's been a lot of conversation about the unanimous agreement, but I don't think there actually was unanimous agreement. Our vice president for ASLCC, the student organization, did not support the tuition increase proposal. I also don't support the tuition increase proposal. I think that it is excessive. I think that it puts additional and unnecessary burden on the students. I won't be supporting it.
Chelsea?
Thank you. So, and to echo a lot of what Mike has said, this was presented to us as a package. We heard a lot of testimony this evening about, a really broad range of support for what has come in front of us tonight, which, we heard time and again. Many folks here tonight saying that they cannot remember in any recent memory coming to, such a conclusion such as this, pretty much unanimously. I think we're in an incredibly difficult scenario. This has not been an easy time for this college or for our community or for the world for that matter. As Provost Durrell has said, in an ideal world, tuition would be $0. But I think that what has come in front of us tonight, while it is not perfect in terms of the impact that could be felt by various stakeholders, I think that it has mitigated as much harm as possible. I think a lot of time and thought has gone into this. So I am in support of the full package that has come, the full package proposal that has come in front of us this evening.
Rosie?
Thank you. I guess I have a longer memory than some because I can remember numerous occasions over the last 10 years when the Budget Development Subcommittee has brought forward what it purported to be a unanimously supported budget recommendation. And without exception, they have included tuition increases. When there was the potential to vote on the two component parts of this recommendation, I could see a way to support at least the $10 emergency fee that would be covered by the federal emergency funds. But now that it's the will of the group to put them back together again, I cannot support this proposal. It is an inward focus while hard work was done. And there's no question, and I'm very appreciative of President Hamilton and her team and the participants on this Budget Development Subcommittee and their time and their effort. That is an inward focused group, and the only group that has a policy-making role at this point, that has an external focus, that has a role to protect members of the community who can't speak for themselves in this discussion is us. And so as far as I'm concerned, it's not unanimous until this policy board makes it unanimous. And to me, it's not unanimous. I don't support continued tuition increases. And while there has been yeoman effort to try to belay this one, at least for a year, so that students don't feel it, at the end of 12 months, then they would feel it. So I can't support this motion.
Okay, so I have myself in the queue. I also am appreciative of all the work that has gone into the proposal, and I also appreciate the effort that has been done to leverage federal funding to protect students from increased costs going forward in the next year. I appreciate the effort that the recommendation, the total recommendation part 1 and 2 are tied to the CCF, and that there is money allocated towards the ending fund balance in this package that I believe contributes to focusing on a route to financial stability for this college. So I do think there are both the financial stability, which is a significant responsibility of this board, as well as stabilizing, moving towards the stabilization of student costs are both included in this package. And so I support both pieces. And I see Matt's hand, and then I'd like for us to consider moving forward with the amendment.
I was going to call the question, Madam Chair.
Okay, so calling the question requires us to vote, and there were no other hands. So would you, I would call it, would you consider removing that? And we can just go ahead and vote, or do you want us to vote on calling the question?
I believe if it's presented as without objection and no one objects, we can move right to a vote, but I'm not the parliamentarian of the group.
Well, obviously neither am I, but if we have a motion to call the question, we need to vote on it. So is there any objection to the motion to call the question?
No objection.
Seeing none, then I will call the question. So we first need to vote on the amendment to the motion. And the amendment to the motion is to add approval of the recommended tuition rates for the 2021-22 fiscal year. So that is, that's a package that is being recommended. So Donna, could you call the roll on that amendment, please, for a vote on that motion?
Sure.
On that amendment.
Holly Johnson,
Yes.
Angela Van Kraus,
No.
Mike Eister,
Yes.
Matt Keating,
Aye.
Chelsea Jennings,
Yes.
Rosie Pryor,
No.
Lisa Fragola.
Yes. So we have passed the amendment to the original motion. Would anybody like to speak to the motion as amended, or if there's no objection, I will move to the roll call vote. Seeing no objection, Donna, you can call the roll call for vote on the amended motion, which includes both 1 and 2 of the recommendation from the budget subcommittee. Donna?
Sorry, I was muted. I was out all these names. Holly Johnson,
Yes.
Angela Van Kraus,
No.
Mike Eister,
Yes.
Matt Keating,
Aye.
Chelsea Jennings,
Yes.
Rosie Pryor,
No.
Lisa Fragola.
Yes. So the motion passes as amended. I think that is the end of this action item, and we'll move on to action item C, which is the Hotel, Restaurant, and Tourism Management Program. Provost Jarrell?
Thank you, Chair Fragola. So what we have for you to consider tonight is a approval of a program. The state requires that all new programs are approved by the Board of Education. This is technically not a new program. We have had a hospitality program at Lane for about 30 years. As you are aware, we had a program that was rejected by the state last year because of too many substantive changes. So it had to be treated as a new program. So that's what we have before you, is a new program in hospitality, and that would be the Hotel, Restaurant, Tourism Management
Mike?
I'd like to move approval of the Hotel, Restaurant, and Tourism Management AAS for 21-22.
Second.
Okay, so that was moved by Mike and I believe seconded by both Rosie and Holly pretty asynchronously or synchronously. Are there, Mike, would you like to speak to your motion?
To me, it makes sense. I mean, I regret that we had to make a change. I regret that we had to reduce some things, but I think the direction that it's going to increase more business courses is a good one. And that's all I'll say. I support it.
Okay. Anyone else questions for Paul or comments? Matt?
Yeah, could we touch on faculty engagement? I mean, this is a big deal, and I've long been supportive of, an associate's or expanded degree opportunities at Lane, and so I would love to hear what our faculty partners, what kind of skin in the game they brought to the conversation in this revamping.
So this program, as it's presented to you, was designed and presented through the curriculum committee by the faculty member, the full-time faculty. There's only one full-time faculty member currently in the program, and she shepherded this through the curriculum approval process. I have met with her a couple times to discuss further modifications that might occur in kind of a post-pandemic world in the hospitality industry, and we look forward to working together over the next year to flesh out some other opportunities for students that might exist here. And also, I think where are some opportunities are looking at an associate's degree that's more geared towards transfer. Some of the higher earning potential occupations in hospitality require a bachelor's degree. And so I'd like to see a little bit stronger connections with that as well.
Okay. Not seeing any hands. I'm going to go ahead and let Donna call the roll to vote on the motion, which is to approve the Hotel, Restaurant, and Tourism Management AAS for 2021-22.
Okay, Holly Johnson,
Yes.
Angela Van Kraus,
Aye.
Mike Eister,
Yes.
Matt Keating,
Aye.
Chelsea Jennings,
Yes.
Rosie Pryor,
Aye.
Lisa Fragola.
Yes. So that recommendation passes. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you all.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the discussion items. In the agenda, starting with the COVID-19 reopening safely update from Provost Terrell.
Thank you again. Yeah, so since our last board meeting, the work session 2 weeks ago, there have not been any changes to the institutional plan. We have reviewed and finalized the review of, I think I'd already mentioned apprenticeship and the cross-country championship last time. Those have been finalized, as has been approving a plan for the Eugene Timbers Football Club to come back and use our outdoor facilities. And multimedia media arts had a class that they wanted to have some motion. There's this motion capture suit they wear for animation. So that was approved as well. We are still hovering right around the same number of cases. We haven't had a case in our campus community in quite some time, so I feel pretty good about that. And we are continuing like gangbusters to have vaccination clinics, both mass vaccination clinics on campus and smaller walk-in clinics. I think to date we've probably vaccinated somewhere north of 15,000 individuals. So I feel pretty good about that as well. You're muted.
Thank you. Any questions for Paul? Okay, so seeing none, I'm going to move us to the cultural competency professional development update from Greg Evans.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe in your package you have a chart that outlines our progress over the last 5+ years with cultural competency professional development. One of the things I want to do is zero in on the two columns to the right at the end of the chart there. It talks about, it really kind of shows what has happened in terms of our ability to deliver this type of instruction and education over the pandemic. And that is reflected in the changes that you see. So I'll start with Safe Colleges. Safe Colleges, we have been doing that for a number of years. That particular platform has increased. I expect that we will exceed the 1,276 mark that in terms of sessions that we had last year, as well as the number of hours accrued. You probably will understand that we have no live sign-ins because we had no live activities, workshops, or events over this past year. So that's reflected in the dashes that you see. Our live web series, which we instituted last year, has really taken off. You'll see that we have more than tripled the number of sessions that we have, and our hours have skyrocketed. So employees are really using this, and they're using this in a robust manner. Our fall in service, we only have had one Zoom in service, and that was just last September. And we had 622 people that signed in to that Zoom event. And then our credit by attendance, which is basically our way of expanding the number and the type of social justice involvements that our employees are in and grappling with, on a regular basis. So if they're a member of a social justice organization, doing work with a social justice organization, they can submit documentation, and we will give them credit if the documentation is complete and appropriate. The other thing I want to mention too is a shout out to my project coordinator, Tracy Weimer, who does our statistics and really keeps us on task and accurate in terms of what we're reporting. The other thing too is that I'm working right now on building a couple of assessment tools so that we can gauge and measure our effectiveness in the delivery of cultural competency, professional development. And you will see before the end, well, let me put it this way. You'll see fairly soon the results of the survey that I'm working on in terms of that. We want to measure employee satisfaction, also get tips and suggestions for changes or for new, events and workshops. I will say this finally to kind of wrap it up is that we really had an exciting year despite the pandemic. We've had some great workshops and webinars. They've been excellent. We will continue to do that over the spring term. We have our spring term schedule out now. And I'll also point your attention to our weekly bulletin, which comes out every Monday. And it shows what is available for our employees to engage, upcoming events, upcoming workshops. It also has a listing of some of the workshops most of the workshops that we have recorded, and we have permission to use those recordings. So employees can go back at another time in their workday and engage that material. So we're doing well. I fully expect at the bottom of the page, you'll see our CCPD hours. We have already exceeded last year's total, and I think we will really exceed it this year by the end of June.
Great. Thank you for that update, Greg, and for all of that great work. Are there any questions for Greg Evans? Mike? Whoops. Sorry, Mike, I accidentally muted you.
I'd just like to know that, or I'd like to say that Greg knows that I've often been dazzled by his work. And that's not just recently, that's been for a long time. And this is just another example. Congratulations to you, Greg, and to the entire team. This is great work.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I really appreciate that. And there's one other thing I need to add here too. Siobhan Cancel, who you just appointed to the Budget Committee, I believe she is the first African-American woman to serve on the Budget Committee as well. So.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments for Greg? Holly?
Greg, I also want to thank you for that report and for the work that you're doing in this work, and just want to add that I know a lot of people who benefit from the programs that you guys offer and that are offered as a result of the work that's being done. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Holly. I appreciate that. Also, I would invite the board, if you have any interest, to please engage some of our webinars, workshops that are online. We have a lot of content there. In April, we're going to be focusing on the Latinx community. We've got a great presenter coming in, Javier Avila, and we are also going to have a gentleman that I grew up with who has been a screenwriter and a producer and a director for over 30 years of various movies and things like that. So we're going to have Alan McElroy for 2 days, one day for a presentation and second day for a writer's workshop.
Great. Sounds exciting. Thank you so much, Greg. So I'm going to move us on, if there are no other questions and comments, to program sustainability process update from Paul Jarrell.
Good, thank you again. I just wanted to provide you with a brief update of where we are in the process of the program and services sustainability analysis. This is work that we began about a year ago, and we're trying to institutionalize this as a process, a yearly process of reviewing programs for sustainability. We're on target to present to you recommendations based upon this work at the April board meeting. or the work session, whichever one is your pleasure. Just to kind of update that, we started an initial review about a year ago of about 20 or so program and services. We were looking at program and services that had we had seen significant changes in one way or another in outcomes or efficiencies or enrollments or labor market trends. And so we were looking at some programs to see and ask questions about why that might be true. And are there things that we can do for the programs to make them a little bit more successful in those categories? Or are they programs that simply don't have a demand anymore? Of that initial 20 programs we looked at, we probably took about half of them and did a deeper dive. And of those, even split that down. By the time we had got to the ones that we were really seriously considering, we had about 5 or 6 programs that we were looking at that we did a really thorough analysis on in all of those areas I just mentioned. At this particular point in time, it looks like there will be no recommendations for any program eliminations or closures. There will be a few programs that we will work with to develop sustainability plans to address some of the serious issues that we're seeing. And many of the programs that we've looked at, hospitality being one of them, as I mentioned before, there will be some significant program restructuring, curriculum redesign, and things like that, I think, to align the programs better to meet both the workforce development needs of the community and also to align the investment on the students in time and money with the entry-level wages when they come out with a certificate. So we'll be working with several programs there. So we'll have that work for you next month, and we can do a deeper dive and have a deeper conversation. But if you have any questions about the process or where we are right now, I'm happy to entertain those as well.
Are there any questions? I do have a question, not seeing any hands. So, Paul, I know you previously outlined in a pretty detailed fashion a part of this process that discussed stakeholder engagement, right? You defined for us how, mid-January to mid-February, that there was stakeholder engagement to discuss processing criteria. Mid-February to March, that there was more stakeholder engagement. Early March to mid-March, meeting with the unions to discuss impacts, and then more interviews with impacted stakeholders in late March and early April. And so I'm just curious, in that entire timeline, at what point do you identify the programs that are impacted? I really appreciate the emphasis on opportunities for growth and improvement. I like that model as a framework, but at what point do you identify the programs that are impacted or at risk in this process?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So that was done early on. I would say that was just done by looking at data that we have collected in terms of outcomes of the programs, enrollment trends, significant fiscal trends, changes in expenditures and things like that. So that was the initial kind of warning, if you will, that these were programs that we should take deeper looks at. So that happened actually early on. And we had identified those probably, nearly a year ago. And we have done similar work like this, but never systemically. And these were programs that had routinely been, on the watch list for several years. One of the things that I think is important that we're going to try to do is make this process be more transparent as part of just an annual review, where if we've got 65 programs in our portfolio, we do deep dives in, a set of them every year, so that we can have this process be more routine instead of just looking for something to go find a problem with or whatever. So I think that, the initial programs that we looked at were those that were low FTE, meaning that they had seen significant enrollment declines over the years, were having completion issues. Students were leaving, stopping out of the programs before they finished. And then also looking at cost and some of the cost escalators in these. Those were the initial things we looked at that drew more attention to some programs more than others.
Okay, so that's helpful in terms of helping me think what went into the process. I guess what I'm really looking for is at a certain point in this process, you identify the programs that you think are going to be impacted, right? And
Correct.
I'm assuming you share that with the impacted individuals. And I'm
Correct.
wondering why that information wouldn't be shared with the board, and at what point in the process is it appropriate to share that information with the board? So that's one thing I'm wondering. When I look at board policy 30, the board has the authority to approve all major academic, vocational, technical programs of study, degree, certificates, and diplomas. It's pretty broad policy, and based on the feedback that we got from stakeholders at the last board meeting, there was a lot of anxiety and concern, and I'm just wondering if more communication with the board through the process at the different points that it's occurring might help everybody involved. And then the other reason I'm asking this question is because I also wonder if we don't need to back it up a little bit. If we're getting to March and April and we're informing stakeholders, I wonder if that gives us enough time, or if it's going to occur that a program might actually end up getting derailed because the approval process doesn't happen with enough time, right? And so I'm just curious about maybe this process needs to start earlier in the year. And it sounds like I know a lot of work has been done for a long time, but those are just a couple things I'm thinking about.
I agree with you fully about starting the process sooner. This should never be a process that is linked to a budget cycle, which it has been for years, right? This is really a process that should be routine about always making sure that the college is offering the programs that the community needs, and that we're doing it in a way that is sustainable and provides an opportunity for students. So that's budget independent, right? We wouldn't want to offer a program that students invest in that gives them no opportunity if it was free, right? I mean, I think, so I agree with you 100%. I'm totally willing to look at the process and make it be more standalone, if you will, apart from any kind of budget decision, because it really shouldn't be part of that. And I didn't treat it as part of that. That's one thing that you could draw your attention to for sure. But yeah, no, I don't disagree with you on that count. I will say this though, that it's hard to have a conversation about programs, because these are programs, and I having been a lifelong educator and a faculty member for many years, I know what it's like to have someone looking at your baby under a magnifying glass, right? I think it's hard to have a lot of these conversations about what ifs and investigations if we're doing them too much out in the public anyhow, because there are conversations that have to happen just to figure out, what is the potential fate of a program, whatever. I do think we need to engage early on, stakeholder engagement in those conversations. I just don't know what the right forum is for that, but I'm happy to explore opportunities for sure.
I see Marge has her hand up, and then Matt.
Yeah, so thank you very much. We totally agree. And what we've been doing is looking at the calendar to see where it would make a more natural fit. And I think it's a more natural fit in the fall. So with a lot of the work that Paul and IR has done, we're going to just roll that into the spring and then try to put our programs, similar to the way the board looks at policies, put programs on cycles so that they're looked at. And then we can bring to you no later than, I'd say, between Thanksgiving and December. So you see the list, you see what the assessment brought up, and then that way it's transparent that the board knows what we're looking at and why. That's our recommendation to the board.
Great, thanks, Marge. I have Matt and then Mike.
Oh, thanks. I'm somewhat confused because it sounds like we're talking about program review, So how does this differ from program review? And is there a way to, for the sake of transparency, illustrate how many and what particular programs we're discussing, especially since the conversation was prefaced with, at this juncture, there are no programmatic cuts or reductions, which is great. I applaud that. But kind of piggybacking off what Chair Fragala is expressing, I am curious as to what type of programs, how many programs, and how this weaves into academic program review.
Just in short, I think it complements academic program review, and we don't look only at academic programs, but so it would complement program review in general when we do program review. So it does complement that. It looks at it a little bit different. I mean, program review, when faculty engage in program review, they're really looking at program improvements from the sense of how can I improve my program to sustain it, to keep it moving forward as it is, right, necessarily, or keeping up with what's in there. There's not always that look at the industry needs in the industry sector per se as detailed, I think, as might be looked at alongside that process. Our academic program review process, I don't think currently, at least the way it is, doesn't have that ability built into it. It's certainly not something that we could adjust and add to it. Like I said, they're not independent of each other by any means, and they shouldn't be independent of each other. I think they complement each other.
Mike?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we do both. And if a community college can't respond to be nimble to the needs of the community, then we're not really in the community college business. Universities don't change programs based on a changing need in a community, but community colleges have to do that. The community is dependent on the community college to be nimble and to respond to changes in the local economy. So I think it's really important that we retain the sustainability program. I think it's also a difficult, Paul has a very difficult job in deciding who gets to know first. And when you know, and once you notify the board, you've announced it to the world. And I can see some advantages if Paul is working with a department head or a program head to having some conversation with that person before it goes public. So I kind of lean toward the way Paul is currently doing it, as opposed to saying, you know, I'm considering these 20 programs and making a public announcement about that, even before he's narrowed it down to 4 or 5. So I just wanted to weigh in on that.
Anyone else have a question or comment? Okay, so thank you very much, Paul. And I believe you will be bringing a more comprehensive report to the April meeting, correct?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, thank you.
You're quite welcome.
So I am going to move us on to the next discussion item, which you may not have there in your agenda because it was pulled from the consent agenda. So we have 2 items that were pulled from the consent agenda, bond project new building design team selection and bond project parking lot rehabilitation pavement repairs. And I believe that Matt Keating pulled those from the consent agenda and had some questions about the implementation of the community benefits agreement. And so I'm wondering if we have Jennifer Hayward or Tom Goodhue here with us. Okay, great. Both. Awesome. Who's up to bat?
I think Jennifer's going to take this one for first round.
Okay.
Oh, I was going to wait for Matt's question. Do you want me to just review what we did, or do you
Matt,
have
what would you like? Do you have a specific question, or did you want an overview of how the CBA?
I think we're familiar with how the CBA works, but here's I guess it's a question and just a clarification. For the new building design team selection, the CBA is referenced. However, it says, at least in our packet, it says that the scoring rubric for design services contained points for understanding the college's goal, including the community benefits goal, but it doesn't share with us what those specific points are. It just simply says that they met a goal, which is I get the longing to want to be efficient, but when I open up the parking lot rehabilitation, which is a much smaller project, clearly, I see a table that includes bid value, responsiveness, CCB number, contact information, etc. And it makes me wonder if a table for those larger projects exists where we could see what the CBA scoring rubric is for each respective RFP.
Yeah, we could include something more specific in future board documents, but just to kind of dive into that a little bit, the rubric itself doesn't describe detail about how you give points for the CBA understanding. It's just one of about 10 different things that we score proposers on. So the scoring items, and I'm sorry, this is from memory, but and Tom can jump in if he wants to, but it has to do with experience on higher ed projects. And Tom, can you help me out here? I mean, there's a bunch of things that we score.
Yeah, we have team member experience, firm experience, project approach, project control, and understanding of the college's goals. One of the things, this is a professional service agreement or RFP, which is very different than the hard bid on the parking lot, which is a construction project. And part of the Oregon requirements for procurement in professional services is it's truly based on qualifications, professional qualifications, and there's no cost component or quantification of goods to it per se. So just a different approach to that makes the rubric a little different.
The language is college benefits or understanding college priorities. What was the last rubric, Tom?
I'm going to go back to the way it's written in here because I do have some things up here. It is college. Let's see. Bear with me. Understanding of the college's goals.
Got it.
And
So, okay, thank you. So understanding of the college's goals, that's where the CBA falls, correct?
yes.
Okay, great. I appreciate that background. It just sounds to me a little more nebulous than what, and I don't want to create, I mind you, I'm one of 7 here. I don't want to create any work for staff, but if the staff is using the existing board approved community benefits agreement, I would hope that it would be a little more specific than just the nebulous college goals. And so if that work exists in a table form or whatever, I would think that both the board and the community benefits oversight committee would be interested in seeing that for significant projects.
Thank you, Matt. And just to let you know, the next RFP that we put out that you're not seeing at this meeting, but that you'll see at a future meeting, probably the April meeting, is for the CMGC for the Building 19 seismic project. And we were much more specific in that one. So I think we're learning as we go. This one, we perhaps weren't as specific as we could have been. And this CMGC one that you'll see coming up is going to be much more specific. And if you want to see the specific language that it was in the CMGC RFP for the Building 19 seismic project, that was in the facilities report and the board packet for February.
And Jennifer, could you just say what CMGC is?
Thank you. Sorry. Construction manager, general contractor. And that's a way to hire a contractor with qualifications so that they can submit a proposal and you review them based on their qualifications rather than just a hard bid method.
Thank you. And I would just ask my colleagues, so I'm not in left field, just asking what, as one of 7, inserting myself in a position where I shouldn't be inserting myself. Is my recollection accurate?
So Matt, I appreciate you asking about this and thinking about if the CBA the community benefits agreement is being implemented thoughtfully, because I agree with that as a priority. I would say that I had the opportunity to attend a PD with Jennifer and Tom, and in that PD did learn quite a bit about the different bid processes and the difference in the I'm going to say it, CMGC, the general contractor, construction model general contractor. I'm having a hard time remembering that one, but that and the bid design build. And they also talked about why design teams look a little bit different because of the professional requirements for those bids. So I'm certain, and I'll ask Jennifer and Tom, that, I'm guessing that in the process moving forward with the new building, we will see a lot more of the community benefits agreement articulated as we move into the contract and the construction type process. It's just a little bit different for design RFPs.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Great. But I appreciate that we're looking at this. So thank you, Jennifer. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you both.
So I'd like to suggest that we look at these 2 projects together. So do I have a motion to approve both of these bond projects?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Great, thank you. So I have a motion to approve the new building design team and the parking lot rehabilitation pavement repairs. Donna, can you call the roll on that, please?
Sure. Holly Johnson,
Yes.
Angela Van Kraus,
Aye.
Mike Eister,
Yes.
Matt,
Aye.
Chelsea Jennings,
Yes.
Rosie Pryor,
Aye.
Lisa Fragola.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So that concludes the discussion items, though I guess we kind of had a little action there on those last 2. And let's go ahead and move into reports. First, we'll have a report from Lane Community College Student Government with Sean Wayland.
Thank you, Chair Fragola. For the record, my name is Shauna Weiland, the Vice President of the Student Government Association at Lane Community College. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm going to brace you for a potentially boring comparative to my colleague Amber's reports. I'm the systems guy. I tend to get into finding problems and proposing solutions to those problems rather than cultural issues or more exciting, potentially hot button issues that the student government might get involved in. So a lot of the work that we've been doing this term has been relative to our own governing documentation that states what we can and cannot do. At our last public Senate meeting, we passed a version of our constitution that will go on to the student ballot elections in the spring term that allows the student government to take over some sort of support role over the Student Activity Fee Committee. That has been a good in theory process, but bad in process situation. The student government has recognized that we could take more of a leadership role in providing structural support for that committee in adopting some of their responsibilities and the committee's inner workings into the student government, so that we would better be able to prepare processes and outlines for exactly how it should and should not work, so that it's not a year-to-year changing environment for all of our fee receiving groups to adapt to every year. The first barrier to that was that the student government is in itself a fee receiving group and should not have any additional authority over the governing body that decides that funding model. So our draft of the Constitution involves separating that conflict of interest in separating our fee into a more student controlled rather than a student activity fee controlled model. So if the students agree on the ballot, that will be a separation that we will hopefully work on with our administrative partners in the future, so that we can provide more support for the Student Activity Fee Committee in future years. For the coming term, spring term, we are looking at seeking out some data points on what the most effective methods for communicating with the student body is in our remote environment. We're going to be rolling that out in a very early spring term raffle sort of situation that we're going to be offering some meals to our students and seeing which outreach methods yield better results, which ones have more engagement, so that we can use that data to jump in and say, okay, here's how we engage our students. Because right now we are, like a lot of organizations, failing in how to reach our student body when just email and Zoom meetings are our perceived options. So those are our major components. There's a lot of other structural stuff that I'm getting involved in, bringing our students into a college employee sort of model rather than independent contractors. We've encountered a change in the reporting model for taxes that has hit independent contractors specifically this year, and that all of our student government members are independent contractors. Some of our students are first-time tax filers, and having to go through all of that, I'm seeing a problem that I want to solve. So again, just finding problems and presenting solutions and trying to work with involved stakeholders to create those proposed suggestions. And that's really what the student government is up to this term and the early phases of next term. We will be looking, of course, to see what changes happen and pivot to what comes up and what gets brought to our plate during the spring term, but that's the plan for now.
Thank you for that report, Shauna. Let's move on to LCCEF's report from Frankie Kokenor.
Yes, hello again. So thank you, everybody. So my name is Frankie Kokenor. I'm the president of Lane Community Colleges Employee Federation. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Our union executive council would like to congratulate our newest board member, Holly Johnson, on her appointment to the board. We really enjoyed the time that we were able to spend with you, Holly, in our meeting last week. We're excited to have an African-American woman on our board. We're also very excited about your job and educational experience and what it'll bring to our school. So thank you and congratulations. We're happy that we were able to ratify our contract and wrap up this last year's bargaining. What a journey that ended up being. Thank you to the board for your patience with how long that took. On August 14th of 2020, President Joe Biden, the candidate, he was at that time the candidate Joe Biden, spoke to AFSCME Union, which is the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, thanking them for their resilience, sacrifice, and character that they have all shown during the challenging moment for this nation, noting that they've been holding this country together right now, keeping the hospitals safe and clean and effective, getting unemployment checks to the hands of people who've lost their jobs, and that there are workers often unseen but always essential, saying that Americans are waking up to that fact, that the blinders are coming off, and that we're recognizing who it is that makes this country run. And he wants to shift the balance of power back to the workers of this country, guaranteeing public sector employees collective bargaining rights. He might have been speaking to and about AFSCME, but he was definitely speaking about essential workers. And for this community college, it is the classified workers who've been working behind the scenes, keeping this college running. This includes custodians, facility, public safety, IT, project coordinators, administrative specialists, academic advisors, enrollment services, health clinic employees, financial aid advisors, event and class schedulers, HR employees, and many positions on this campus that I have not mentioned. These essential workers are working hard so our faculty members can teach the students and continue to provide an excellent education that this fine institution is known for. If it wasn't for us working the front lines on this campus and at home using our own resources, this college might not have survived. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Frankie. Moving on to LCCEA's report, we have Adrienne Mitchell.
Good evening, Board of Education members, and welcome, Holly. We're so grateful that you have joined the Board of Ed, and we look forward to working with you. I'd like to speak about a few topics briefly this evening. The first is to highlight the critical role of you all as Board of Education members. And I would like to point your attention to a few relevant board policies. BP 30 provides that the Board of Education shall approve major substantive changes in the college's mission, policies, and programs. BP 220 provides that the president shall study budget needs and prepare recommendations on programs and services for budget committee consideration. BP 330 assures that the president will keep the board aware of relevant trends and, among other things, material external and internal changes. And BP 510 ensures that the Board of Education shall ensure that the college is organized and staffed to reflect its mission, size, and complexity, and approve an academic and administrative structure or organization. Publicly elected boards provide a critical role in giving voice to the community, ensuring accountability and oversight for public institutions, and we are deeply grateful for your volunteer service in this capacity. LCCEA respectfully requests your active engagement in your roles as board members in participation on all votes related to programs, including program suspensions and eliminations, consistent with board policy and past practice, your participation on consideration on votes on all details of proposed budgets, including any eliminations, reductions, restructures, or reorganizations that impact contracted employees. And specifically, we request your engagement in consideration and voting on the proposed restructure of the IR department, the Institutional Research Department, which will result in a layoff of one contracted faculty member, according to formal notice that has been provided to LCCEA by the administration. Because this is budget season, I would be remiss to not share some more long-term budget strategies. The strategies that we recommend include a staffing analysis of all employee groups and all funds, a review of the college's vast real estate holdings for one-time use to offset one-time expenses, such as ending fund balance restoration, addressing Titan Court apartment building debt, such that payments do not continue to drain Fund 1, especially, but also Fund 6. And I'd also like to especially thank Zach and Greg for their work on that issue this year in the Budget Development Subcommittee. In addition to that, we recommend implementing a zero-based budgeting reset of the entire college budget. We recommend considering foundation fundraising for the types of expenditures typically paid through a foundation, such as board member and president travel. And we also recommend considering updating BP 245, the ending fund balance policy, to include both funds 1 and 9, rather than a single fund, Fund 1, which comprises less than 45% of the total of all funds. On a final note, LCCEA is committed to continued advocacy at the legislature for increased funding and systemic change for the community college system, so that we may fulfill our critical role in creating an equitable community for the public good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adrienne. So the remainder of our reports are written reports. Does anybody have any questions about any of those reports? Matt Keating?
Yes, Provost Jarrell referenced something called Retention a Palooza, and it's an effort by which volunteers reach out to students who haven't enrolled or for whatever reason are off course or off track. Paul, if you're available, I'd love to hear more about Retention Palooza. What's the plan? What are the metrics? How many volunteers were there? How many calls were made? I'm kind of calling you out, so apologies for asking some specifics if you don't quite have those in front of you. But just a brief overview of Retention Palooza and how it went would be great, please.
No worries. In fact, I think Mindy Dew's on here. She led that effort, our Associate Vice President, Student Affairs. If she's still on here, she can maybe give you some comment. If not, I can throw together a report for you and email that out. No problem. It was very successful, and we do have some numbers. I just don't have them in front of me right now.
Great. And it's something that we're going to continue to embrace. And
yeah, absolutely. And I think it was very successful in contacting students. It did yield some results in students registering sooner than they otherwise would have, or maybe not have even. And we do plan on expanding on it and doing it even at different momentum points in their careers. So.
Well, please keep me in the loop if you need an extra caller.
You want to call? All right.
I'm always down to phone bank.
All right, you're on. That'd be great. We'll do it. I'll get you a written report for the board to share with the board on the results of that.
Any other questions in terms of the reports? Rosie.
Sorry about that. My question pertains to the enrollment report. I want to say how much I appreciate receiving it, and I wonder if there would possibly be the option to add one more table. I like having the opportunity to see year over year, but I would like to see the long-term trend every month. I would like to see, be able to get a beat on whether that line is going up or down. So I'd rather see several years going back in addition to the information you provided. So thank you very much. If that's an option, I'd be grateful.
Richard?
Yes, ma'am. We are working on that right now. Our first beta on that is out amongst the deans and the cabinet. We have a 5-year trend analysis, but we can expand that if so needed. We expect a launch during the late spring, early summer term. Thanks so much.
Are there any other questions regarding reports? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move us on to board reports. I do not have a report from Lane County of Governments. We've not met since the last report I gave. Does anyone else have a report? Matt?
Yeah, I made a contribution to KLCC and yielded this pretty awesome KLCC Public Radio Foundation jacket. KLCC is on top of mind because tomorrow is our foundation board meeting. So with your permission, Madam Chair, I will email you a report from tomorrow's meeting to distribute to the board.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to move us on to the OCCA board report. You're going to see in so OCCA there hasn't been a meeting since February for OCCA board members. And there is here in the board report the digest from March 5th and March 12th. But the thing I wanted to call your attention to was the 2021 OCCA